Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kyle Hanslovan, CEO at Huntress.
Huge thanks, Jason, for the warm introduction, and obviously stoked to be back for another year of Robin Robbins Boot Camp. I know some of you are already disappointed that my crazy beard from quarantine has been cut, but rest assured I'll make up with it with solid content. For those of you who don't know me, or this is your first time getting a chance to see one of our demos at Huntress, I'm Kyle. I'm the CEO at Huntress. And before starting the company, I was actually a cyber warfare operator at NSA. So my job was breaking into networks, gathering data, and more importantly, like maintaining long-term access. That was my niche. With that said, I won the World Series of Hacking with my co-founders once. And generally speaking, just short of like taking care of the kids nowadays, hacking is the one good thing I do in my life. So I decided to stay true, kind of continue on with our boot camp demonstration this year. And so what I want to reiterate is a lot of this, right? Our typical demonstrations are interactive. We're on stage taking Q&A, and we're going to try to do some of that. But keep in mind, there is a little bit of delay as I speak and we give feedback. But feel free to use some of those questions, feed it up through, and we'll work the best as we can with this remote environment. With that said, a lot of folks know us as this is the company that went out. We found hackers on the dark web that were selling access to an MSP. Not only that, they were selling it for multiple accounts. And not only did we find this person, we helped collaborate with a couple other vendors and got this person arrested who was hacking MSPs. So this is what we do for a living. We both find hackers and use our offensive expertise to be able to get down to brass tacks and figure out what can we do to protect our partners. And there's over 1,000 MSPs that use us worldwide. With that said, most of you recall last year, if you saw our other hacking demonstration, we chose a company out of the audience. It was a friendly company here, United Systems, and rather large in Kentucky. With that said, we used a demonstration last year that we went after them where we used phishing. We got in with O365, and it was a pretty fun demonstration. We simulated how we would get in through HR looking for open resumes. We saw they were advertising for jobs, and we followed up with a fun email saying, hey, I'm a trustworthy technician. I want to get a job. Please open my macro-enabled document. Please, please, please. It was so well received that, with this, that we actually went and put together a full-on demonstration. So for those of you who are scratching your head and asking, why in the world did this say hacking demo revisited? Well, this is year number 2 of hacking demonstrations. And just like last year, our goal was not only how do we educate you and show you how hackers are doing these incidents, but we put together a whole training kit, videos, you name it. So for those of you who haven't already grabbed this, these free videos, free demos, you don't have to be a Huntress partner. You can get these right now from our virtual booth in the software in case you didn't know this. With that said, the number one thing that you should ask yourself is if there's a technical founder on this demo, what would he set the agenda? And it turns out it's hack. We're going to do some learning and you guessed it, some more hacking. I've mentioned before that one of the things that most bothers me is I've noticed our MSPs are starting to, within the media, get a bit of a reputation as similar to Zoom right now, has a bit of a taint, right? That, oh, Zoom software was vulnerable. And although they patched it, everybody's a little concerned about Zoom. There's constantly news that's trying to paint MSPs out to be ransomware enablers, right? Them are the ones who are enabling small businesses to get compromised. And that bothers me a whole lot. So this whole presentation will be educating you on how some of these incidents happen so you can go back and educate your own clients, but also get spun up on what's the latest and greatest. And most importantly, get rid of that ransomware enabling stigma. So the question, right? How are we going to get in this year? So I did quite a bit of, reading, quite a bit of learning. I looked at over, all the incidents that we've had since last year, kind of weighed down, what are we seeing most often in the wild? And I'll be darned, right? We're all now working from home. And it turns out just yesterday, Threat Post comes out and says, you know what? Brute force attacks still continue to hit remote desktop. And this is something almost every vendor has been talking about for years of remote desktop provides some new attack service. It also provides a lot of great functionality right now that's allowing you to not have to, maybe spring for the VPN software in your network or for your clients who are working from home so they have access to those line of business. But I know most of our partners that are, concerned about RDP, they talk till they're blue in the face to their partners and say, you know what, this is a risk, but let's be real. Some partners just won't allocate budget for security because they just don't see the value. So I've learned over the years, especially with the help of Robin Robbins, that a lot of this is how do you show them what is the pain point? show them the value instead of tell them what to be afraid of. And so with brute forcing, I thought this was an ideal instance to do a new hacking demo. So I just literally set this up and started building this last night. The goal of this is to educate you all. And the reason for it is a lot of our partners will see things like, local MSP gets hacked, right? All the clients crypto locked, but you don't get to see how this tends to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pivot real quick from the slides that we're currently used to seeing. And I want to talk a little bit more about some of the slides that, it's just a little bit atypical for a pitch. And where I want to go with that is I want to show you, for instance, marketplaces. We hear about the dark web. We talk about the dark web. Last week, we just did an awesome webinar with the team at ID Agent, sharing like, what do the dark webs look like? But a lot of you probably don't realize that, look at these. These are like well-polished marketplaces. And for instance, some of the things for sale are things like, hey, look, this is the biggest remote desktop platform for as low as $3.50 a month. And look at the advertising and marketing here. Not only do they have pricing, which clearly it's on sale right now, they've got COVID-19 specials, ladies and gentlemen. With that said, take a look at some of these. They're really pitching these hard. So not only are they warning that they're the biggest platform for dirt cheap, they have specials. They have reputation. Look, since April of 2 years ago, they've sold 590 accesses to people. And this is just the one seller. Keep in mind, this is also only one marketplace. And so similar to how, like, you can imagine when you're buying, your face razors to get rid of that cruft from living inside, right? Or for me, right, getting some of my moisturizing foundation to make myself look beautiful, right? You're going to go to eBay, you're going to go to Amazon, you're going to go to a lot of ridiculous places. They sell these tools from the same place, but notice they also market, right? You could get remote desktop access for as low as 50 cents, no BS. And here it is back again with new branding, right? So what else to be excited about? Back with new branding. So I immediately thought, you know what? Let's stop with the nonsense in regards to talking about RDP getting hacked, and let's look into how it's actually getting hacked. And more importantly, when somebody does get in, how do they target a victim? Not only how do they target a victim, how do they get initial access? And then, like I told you, my job was long-term persistent access. I want to share with you what that long-term persistent access is going to look like. So give me 1 second to spin up here. And we're going to bring up two computers, and I'll go into full screen mode here. You can see I was doing some prep, but what we'll do is we'll clear off this computer. This is going to be my victim, by the way. This is our lovely 2019 server box, just built yesterday. And I'm going to go as far as setting her up to ready to be compromised. So we're back to basics. In this state right now, not compromised. My other machine, in case you're not familiar with this one right here, right, with the cool Kali Linux Dragon, this is a free attack platform software that's meant for like pen testing and security audits, security assessments, and it's free. We're talking about like, no, you don't have to sign up for a trial. No, you don't have to give your email address and get spammed for the rest of your life. It's free. You go on the internet, you type in Kali Linux, you get a virtual machine. And so what I want to share with some of this here is these computers that I have, right? If you see the dark and gloomy machine here, right? That's the Kyle being the hacker. And when you see this machine over here, that's going to be the Windows, right? This is our victim. This is what would happen in the victim environment. And you'll notice majority of what I'm going to do, since I'm targeting a server 2019 box, it's a little bit different than targeting end users where you expect them to open an email or browse to a website or something of that nature. So we'll go back to our attack platform and we'll talk about this a little bit of what tends to happen. Well, first and foremost, right, this is a simulated environment, but I want to remind you, you as an MSP can definitely do some of these incidents yourself. I'm going to go ahead and set up this, make the font a little bit bigger for everybody screen sharing that can watch. And you'll notice the first thing I do with this Kali Linux VM, right? I've got a handful of computers ready, or a handful of terminals, and I need to make sure that I've loaded this software up and I'm ready to attack. And I've already done this here for you. So think about this. I began my day as a hacker. I've got my cup of coffee. I'm now ready to go. You can imagine somewhere along the lines, they start scanning the internet to enumerate. And there's a lot of different ways to go about that. For instance, one of the most common tools that people use, and there was already a presentation at Robin Robbins that briefly talked about a tool called Shodan. And Shodan, if you think about it, It's a search engine that allows you to do all kinds of ridiculous searching for attacks. So if you think about ridiculous attacks, you could think of like remote desktop, right? Or RDP. And you could, no joke, you could go in here and search, where do I find RDP? Or even better, you could type in remote desktop and search by, different countries, different areas, what's in Florida. And notice if we use remote desktop instead of just the acronym RDP, we see right now there's over 4 million worldwide hosts. What's crazy about this is at the peak of 2019, when all MSPs were coming together to try to say, I'm worried about getting hacked, that number was closer to 2 million. So if you want to talk about what work from home truly looks like, Huntress, within our 500,000 computers that we monitor, there was only about 60,000 external IPs, and that range, 30,000 is as low as it got. If you took a look right now, work from home has ballooned to over 100,000 unique external IPs where people are no longer working behind a NAT. Anyways, I digress. But what's neat about this is it's a search engine that you can go find target computers. And look at these. You can actually see people's real computers, somebody in the Philippines, name RTG administrator, and they'll even go through and take a picture. So it's pretty neat. I encourage all of you to play with this if you haven't, but that's outside the scope of what we're doing. I just want to give you an idea that when I'm, as a hacker, starting my cup of coffee, maybe I'm like, you know what? I don't want to hack somebody in China or Russia. I'm going to go after businesses in the US. Clearly, I haven't logged in here, but what I'm going with it is with filters, you can actually filter down to the country code. What's neat about that is, say I eventually find an IP, voila, our victim in this case. This could be your client. This could be your MSP. This could just be, think about it, like as a dentist, you're not really working from home. You're not doing procedures or, working on cavities from home. However, as something like a finance department, think about it, tax season just technically ended, but it's extended. So we're in extended tax season right now. They're definitely working from home. And some of their line of business applications like QuickBooks at Home, some of the QuickBooks Server instead of QuickBooks Cloud, and other servers like that are only available on site. So, some of you have given them access through VPN, but other of you have given access through remote desktop. So let's take a look real quick at how a hacker would start their day. So I'm using a free tool within Metasploit that's going to be called Nmap. Nmap's job is just to map all the open ports. And I'm using a fancy argument called capital A. This just means find all the things. Try to fingerprint the OS, do your thing. And even though I'm making it scan just my victim, right? In this case, I already have my victim's IP. I could give this something like a /24 and do that whole, .1 through .255. But in this case, we're just going to go after one IP. So we'll let this do its thing and think about what the hacker is really doing. The hacker doesn't necessarily know if you're still even on the internet, right? Just because they found you in Shodan, they don't know if it's there. It could be old, right? Search engines sometimes have old updates and sometimes cache data. So that's no different than the same headaches that hackers have to run through. So I'll continue here, and part of you could imagine if you're giving this demonstration, there's a big misunderstanding that most companies think like, you know what? I'm not the victim. And we demonstrated last time that it's so easy through the last hacking demonstration that anybody could send you a malicious email and get you to open it nowadays. Prevention, there's no such thing as perfect prevention. It's 2020. However, somebody always needs an idea of like, well, how would they find me? Show me, don't tell me. And so imagine, if we go back to Morton's Steakhouse, it was cool when you had everybody coming in for your maybe once a quarter marketing. But as Robin will tell you, marketing is a persistent thing, just like hacking. You got to be constantly doing it. And so part of your marketing should be embracing some of these web forms that we're doing right now. Anyways, going back, you can see Nmap is doing the very last of its scripts. And voila, just like this, we went and assessed that IP, right? .201 is our victim here. And we see right away we came up with a handful of ports. All right. For the non-technical people, ports just means like open services. So if you think about your banking, your bank, they offer loans, they offer, maybe cash advances, which are a little bit different than long-term loans. And then of course, they'll deposit your checks, get you checkbooks, stuff along those lines. Services provide you access to these things, and you're going to need to be able to articulate, educate to your customers that, this is part of what the hackers are doing. They're trying to figure out what services does this computer offer. So for the non-technical user, you could say, with Windows, this is probably the file shares, right? And if we go a little bit further and take a look, it also has 3389, and it could have been any port. Maybe you got cute and changed it to 3390, right? Shodan will find that, and our hackers will definitely find those ports for you, and that provides you remote access. Notice it also gives you other information though, like they're able to enumerate here that this computer is called Share Server 01. And I know some of you already in the audience are like, oh gosh, I've got one of these computers named Share Server 01. What does that footprint look like? Who's scanning me? And it's okay. This happens on the internet all day long. This is just how the internet works, right? So it's more important about understanding what the attackers can do and getting in front of that. So this is where I'm going to take this demonstration and I want to share a little bit about what people can do. So we've got two major attack surfaces that you can authenticate. Think about your file shares. That's something that if you provide a username and password, you could try to authenticate against the file shares. But the other one is remote desktop, two very good attack surfaces. So let's play along. Let's show how this actually works. And if you can see here at the bottom, I have all kinds of really neat features that I can now, I guess, search for or hack through. So let's take a look. I'm going to use a tool. And if you've never used these tools before, they have great searching features. So I can actually say, oh, I know they're running SMB. It tells me that's that service message block or the file share capability. Look at all the free capabilities available in these tools. For instance, like SMB, I can help maybe do a PS exec, or I could enumerate group policies or group shares. I could try to log in, look up users' SIDs, look up their domain. And so one of the ones that I already had in here was one called SMB enum shares. So we'll type SMB enum shares here. And by the way, when I do these hacking demonstrations, you'll see my mouse go off keyboard or off screen. That's because I'm just copy and pasting here. None of this requires rocket science to do these demonstrations. And if we take a look, we can see what options are available. And this says, you know what, you got to target somebody. You got to give them maybe a username, maybe a password if you have it. But the reality is we don't even have any of that stuff. So we might have to say set SMB pass. Well, we don't have any password. So we take a look at our options. Well, we've unset the password. Set SMB user. We don't have one of those. You know, we're just hacking. We're just trying to get access into it. Go back to our options, but thankfully we already have the IP addresses 201. And what's cool about this is notice the username and password are not required. So let's give it a go. Let's try to run it against our target IP, which was 192.168.0.201, or our victim. Once again, that's that server 2019 box. So here we go. It says login, failed, not able to negotiate, and brought us back nada. Well, it was worth a try, right? Keep in mind, we know this has multiple things that are open, right? If we go back up to our results of when we did our Nmap, we know things like 3389, which was remote desktop, was indeed open. So there's no reason we can't try remote desktoping into these computers. And this is what hackers will actually do. This is part of the reason it's so important to maybe monitor your event logs for failed login attempts or weird after hours. So notice I'm going to just try to remote desktop here. And it tells me, hey, server, certificate's not trusted, but I'm a hacker so what do I care if I trust your stuff? And so I just kind of wait, right? It's going to try to authenticate against this remote server here. And you can see it tried. And since I'm logged into Kali Linux as the root account, clearly there's no root user. And you can see I can't do anything. I don't have a username. I don't have a password. If I go in here, I might be able to turn the magnifying glass on and off, but there really isn't anything I can do to you. So, okay. That's acceptable, right? The attack surface, I can't get in. So what hackers here naturally try to do is they try to escalate their privileges. So I'll make this a little bit larger and let's go to my desktop. And if I take a look at the files on my desktop, notice I've already set up one called passwords and one called users. So what I did before this exercise is I went and found and I looked through all the data I could find on the internet. And it turns out if you look at all the brute forcing that's happened against remote desktop, you will find the most common server names and usernames that get brute forced are, of course, the administrator account, then the admin, user, scanner, test, etc. Then it starts going to, looks like we've got, maybe a German username for administrator. You sometimes get the French ones too that are administrateur, for our French Canadian audience out there, right? But where I'm going with this is that's my list of people that I might want to brute force and do one of these attacks. Your end users have never even thought that hackers might not have any idea how to get in. And so why not just try all of them, right? The next thing they do is they use password lists that just like this, I'll look at the beginning of the password list. And you can see these are just full of all kinds of different combinations, right? So we can go blue in our face, but you see where I'm going here. And so hackers will naturally try to leverage capabilities. So one of the things your users have probably heard about is brute forcing. I always explain it in the simplest words that I have a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 9-year-old. Brute forcing is when they try every pin to get into the, when I lock down the Wi-Fi so it doesn't happen past 9 p.m. and they try every pin till it locks them out for like 39,000 years and I have to go and like undo their iPad. That's them brute forcing the old-fashioned manual way. How hackers are going to do it, right? They're going to use a tool like Hydra. And they're going to say, you know what? Try really fast is what more or less these options mean. It's going to say, give me a list of logons. And notice I'm going to give them a list of all those usernames. And then I have, once again, the list of passwords. So capital P just means password files. The last thing this will let me do is it'll let me try to brute force on all kinds of different ports and protocols. SMB, SSH, Telnet, and in this case, remote desktop, right? So let's give it a go and watch real quick of how brute forcing looks in the wild, right? So we're obviously trying away. And if you think about it, if this server would have been hardened to fake, if somebody tried to log in more than 3 times or more than 15 times, whatever the number is, there should be some sort of lockout period, then maybe an automated unlockout period. Because even if you allowed me to try 15 at a time and I had to try 10,000 passwords, you really are making me have to work for it. It's not perfect, but it's better, right? And this is where you as an MSP, you're really not trying to convince them to have perfect security. You're trying to, enable you to enable them to outrun the bear, right? And so you see, I just tried a bajillion passwords here, and almost everybody will recognize right away that we've got a password. This is probably one of you in your LastPass or whatever you're using for your password manager probably has one of these, right? It's a good old-fashioned keyboard walk, right? This is holding 1, go down to Z, hold shift and then start at 2 and go down to X. That's what that is, right? It's a password walk. And what this allows us to do is now up our game. So for instance, if I go in here with, remote desktop again, and now I say, oh, look, a scanner account. Well, think about this thing. This thing was called Scanner Share, right? Was the name of the actual, or Scanner Server 1 or Share Server 1. This could theoretically be one of those servers that somebody had on the internet that when like that multifunction scanning device was used, it's there to create PDFs and send documents straight to the actual share. Why not try to brute force that? So let's go in and play a little bit of what hackers can do and what they will do when they get in. More importantly, showing your users, showing your clients and educating them on what they're going to do. They might wait till 6, 7, 8 p.m. on a Friday night to do this because they know you've gone home. We're going to try scanner, and keep in mind here, we have the password. That's that 1QAZ, holding shift and going from 2 downwards as well. And what that'll let us do is, because we brute forced, we've now from remotely logged into this server. And the next question is like, oh gosh, okay, I get it, it happens. Obviously you want them to have 2-factor authentication, but that's something that you got to show them. This would be the perfect moment that said, remember, if we would have enabled for you that Azure single sign-on, or that 2-factor authentication through Duo or whatever you're using for that, Passly, there's a handful of these different options for 2-factor. Where I'm going with it is, this is a point to say and have them have that aha moment, because instead of me logging in, I would have got a notification on my phone that said, hey, please accept my password, or please accept this button, or please put in this token. So let's keep pulling the string and see what we can do, right? I always try to imagine what hackers can do. So I'm going to open a command prompt. And the first thing that hackers tend to do is they're going to enumerate things, right? They're going to look stuff at like net local group, and they're going to say, who's an administrator on this machine, right? And in this scenario, I don't know why. I imagine somewhere out there, there's an old school guidance that says, if you run a multifunction device and you want to share servers, make that multifunction an admin. It's a terrible idea. Unfortunately, I can tell you, every single day, I see the administrator account, the test account, the scanner account, the Xerox account, the Sharp account, you name it, Canon, some default admin account getting used to brute force this way. It just happens. So if you give me one more second, I'm cognizant that the audience might not be able to see some of these small font. So let me increase this just a little bit so everybody can follow along what I'm doing. All right, so we've got our computer here. We've got a little bit bigger font. So that's cool. We just happen to have landed in an administrator. And notice this wasn't a targeted attack. This was a target of opportunity. I just got lucky, right? And most of the time, there's not a human behind these. This is a very automated process. Grab the results from Shodan, throw them into a scanner, try the brute force. When I succeed, then get a human involved because that's efficient. It's the same type of stuff you do at the MSP. And say, for instance, you're talking to that accountant. You can say just the same way that you have your lowest level bookkeepers doing the mundane, and then the CPAs doing a lot of the, auditing and make sure they're reconciling the input. They do the same thing. Use the automation, use the junior technicians to do the basics. And only when you get in do you get the heavy hitters. So now you got somebody a little bit more technical. And I can tell you somebody a little bit more technical, the first thing they do when they have an incident like this is they're going to create a backdoor. Right? That was my job at NSA, was long-term persistent access. This is a fundamental piece of a hacker, is when I get in, I don't want to lose my access. So what I'm doing here real quick, even though it might look a little foreign to you, I'm creating a backdoor, assuming that our paste functionality is going to work. If not, we'll just type this sucker out by hand and go from there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a backdoor that's going to allow me to maintain access to this computer. So notice right here, I'm moving from a Windows computer to a Linux computer, copying it onto the clipboard. And we're going to go even further trying to paste it into this box. So let's see, second time's a charm. Sweet victory, we're typing it by hand. All right, so everybody has demo gods, and part of you doing a demonstration is making sure, right, your users enjoy some of this. Hackers stumble just like we do, right? They fat finger things. Nothing is as sexy as the movies. So I'm going to type this out by hand. Software, Microsoft, Windows NT, current version. And what I'm doing is there's a feature built into Windows that allows when an application runs, I'm going to actually call another application. It's a real shady technique that almost every day when we see that remote desktop access, this is immediately what happens. So remember earlier, I opened that magnifying glass. Now I'm saying, you know what? When a magnifying glass is open, run a debugger. And when that debugger runs, actually call command.exe. And thank goodness this appears to have worked. We'll see if I fat fingered it later when we get to it, right? But that's hacker life. Okay, so I went through here, reg add, I added a backdoor. Well, what else am I doing, right? I'm a hacker. I'm not here just to add a backdoor. I'm here to pillage. So oftentimes you'll see, they'll start doing directory lists. What do I have around? Oh, I've got some users. Let's go into the users directory. All right, the scanner account administrator, that's cute. And it really depends. Hackers will kind of do different things at different times. Sometimes hackers will say, I've created my backdoor. You know what? I'm done. I'm going to disconnect. Other times they'll choose other things. Remember, one of the things a hacker might do is they might go back to enum shares. This thing was called a share server, for heaven's sakes. So maybe they go through and remember earlier when I, undid some of those accounts and passwords? This is me going through and now that I have a password, I can add it. Now that I have a valid username, right? Instead of trying the administrator, I can set it, the scanner account. And what's neat about this is now that I've gained a little bit more data, you can see already I've been able to enumerate file shares. So almost right away, people think about like, oh, if they're in RDP, they're moving the mouse and keyboard. That's false. What I typically are going to do is I'm going to immediately put like maybe a payload, like a remote administration tool, which by the way, there's an awesome presentation tomorrow. Don't miss it, about remote administration tools. If you've never seen like how hackers do that, it's a great introduction. Where I'm going with this is hackers have a lot of options here. And so most of the time, someone like me, if for some crazy reason that you are sharing SMB and admin shares out to the internet, I'm going to find it. And the reason I say that so confidently is if you take a look, remember how we talked about Shodan earlier and how you could search and find anything. It's just as crazy, right? Shodan is just as dangerous with this. And so even if we take a look at my results with Shodan, you could see over 1 million hosts here. All righty. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and end this here for everybody. I see I've got some questions, but I want to leave it with maybe the most important piece, which is when we have these incidents, what can you do? Where do you take away from it? And I'm going to leave you with when somebody makes an incident in your network or gets into your box, right? That back door is something that they can really escalate. It's something that can make things, get out of hand real quick. And so think about it. Even if you get rid of my password, you block me out of the website, I'm going to leave you here with just this one little piece that backdoor access that they're going to have to you is going to be something that I'm going to leverage. With that said, I know that we're almost out of time here. I just got the heads up. I'll demonstrate that the hacker now has administrative access to yours. And I just encourage that if you're interested in learning more about this stuff, come see the Huntress team at the booth. Come play, come join, come watch us. And more importantly, I hope everybody has a great Robbins boot camp. So huge thanks for everybody, and catch us there.